take a poll as to who knows the most about the apostles and one particular apostle, wouldn't you think this might be the one that we would know? If I were to ask you to tell me something about Judas, I suspect somebody could, raise their hand and come up with something, and a number of people probably could. What's your general attitude? What makes him stand out in your mind? Betrayal of Jesus, and then the consequences of that he killed himself. Yeah, Rich? I can't hear you, Rich.
He killed for treasure.
Yeah, that's true. It didn't help his record any. That's for sure. We'll talk about that in a second when we get to that. But yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Sadness. When I look at Jesus, I feel sad.
Sad, yeah.
Because of the choices he made.
So why is that? What does it make you feel sad?
Because he had a choice to do good,
Yeah.
make the correct choices, but he didn't. And because of that, he chose to betray Jesus. But that was necessary. That betrayal was necessary. But what was sad is that he didn't repent afterwards. He could have still been redeemed.
Right.
He didn't.
Okay, so I think we feel badly for him, at least I do, because here he had that opportunity to be with Jesus, and then there was something else pulling him. We'll notice that. A couple of things. Jessica mentioned it, but we'll get more to that later. Go ahead, Robert.
I see him kind of similarly to Jessica, a very tragic figure.
Yeah.
He had all the ability for success, chose to ignore the avenues he had, and ultimately, through lack of self-forgiveness, made a very ultimate poor decision.
Yeah. Does that bother you if you feel sorry for him? Or do you have this view that, well, he knew what was right and he did wrong and he committed suicide and it's too bad. It's going to hell. I would say that maybe technically you could be right about that, but I would like for you all to think about that in the sense of, there is a side of all of us when we look at someone who really makes a bad mistake and we think, that might have been a mistake that I could have made. And that's what I think about. I think about the fact that what would it have been like for me at that time, for whatever reason. And again, he had certain sins or certain desires that came out in his life, and I think it certainly was what was promoting it, but I think it's one of these situations where it's a really good thing that when you look at him, you don't excuse what he did, obviously, but don't say, well, that all had to happen because that was the way Jesus was going to be put to the cross. This was all, understand, I know this is very difficult for us to grasp, and that is, there was definitely a plan for this to happen, but that doesn't mean that he was forced to happen. He still had his free will. And that's a little bit complicated too. Some people will think that, as they try to explain it away, that what happened was that when he betrayed Jesus, he didn't expect it to go that far. And so he was kind of shocked, that they actually put Jesus to death. Now, again, I don't think that's a very good explanation because there was plenty of talk amongst Jesus and the apostles that he was going to die. And it was kind of up to everybody to figure out why. But nevertheless, this guy had free choice, but he had the kind of failings that a lot of us do have. Judas Iscariot, nobody knows a lot about the last name other than it probably is a way of describing where he was from. And you can look that up in any Bible dictionary, but we know who this Judas is. But Judas was It was one of those names that, well, I think I have this in a slide down the line. Might as well talk about it now. Do you hear very often anybody named Judas? You ever thought about why? How about Jezebel? How many Jezebels have we had? Okay, so as far as you're concerned, there's Judases all over the place, huh? Why don't people use certain kinds of names?
The negative connotation the name has.
Yeah, and so like if you're giving your boy a name, and then, I mean, there are a lot of people who don't know much about the Bible who probably wouldn't know anything, but a lot of people might think it's kind of an awkward thing to name your child. But I think for the most part, the name describes in a very positive way. I mean, it means something good. It's like royal, or and you think about this. What was the name of one of the sons of Abraham and Isaiah? Not Isaiah. Isaac. What now? Someone, be bold. Go ahead. You were wanting to answer something before, though, weren't you, Nolan?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, for the sake of reason, that you wouldn't name your boy Sue.
Well, there you go. Yeah, very insightful of you on that one, Nolan. Okay. Jesus talks about and talks to this guy. And it's at the end of the ministry of Jesus, they're at the Last Supper, and that's written about in chapter 13 and through chapter 16, roughly. It says that when Jesus had said these things, he'd said some things before. You can go ahead and go back and read those. He became troubled in spirit and testified and said, "Truly, truly, I say to you that one of you will betray me." So how did Jesus feel about it? It's pretty straightforward. He was troubled. He became troubled in spirit. That's what John says. But this was something that really, I'm sure, was a heartbreaker for Jesus. I mean, he knew what was about to go along and what was going to happen, but he brings it up to talk about it. He says, the disciples began looking at one another at a loss to know of which he was speaking. Lying back on Jesus' chest, nodded to this disciple and said to him, this is John, "Tell us who it is of whom he is speaking." He then simply leaned back on Jesus' chest and said to him, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus then answered, "The man is the one for whom I shall dip the piece of bread and give it to him." This is at the supper. So when he had dipped the piece of bread, he took it and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. Okay, so how does that strike you? Do they now know? Well, if they're not paying attention, if they don't know, I know they were very interested. Actually, when you look at the group of questions that are there that they ask, that they want to know, and so Jesus tells them that it's Judas. Now, we don't get any kind of reaction out of them, although you might expect that. Jesus continues to speak on the subject of his betrayal. This is the same place we're just reading on ahead. After this, Satan then entered him. Overwhelmed by the power of the devil, I don't know that I would say that this is some sort of miraculous thing where he's totally out of control, but we understand that we all know that sometimes the devil can have quite a control over us if we allow it to be that way. So Jesus says to him, "What are you doing? Do it quickly." Why do you suppose Jesus said that? Just think about it. You're there, you're thinking, they all found out who was going to do it, And now why does Jesus say, do it quickly? Okay, he certainly did, and it was coming that night, as a matter of fact, when he was going to be arrested. So it's the old, if you're going to do it, do it. And of course, Jesus knew that he was. Now, none of those reclining at the table knew for what purpose he had said this to him. All right, so even though it was demonstrated to him that whoever was going to do something that obviously was adverse, that it's going to be who? Judas. But they still don't understand it all completely. Some were assuming, since Judas kept the money box, that Jesus was saying to him, buy the things we need for the feast. Isn't that interesting? After all of this thing was built up, and it was really more directed toward what he was going to do and the betrayal, but there's a certain naivete about these people. What did they think he might have meant when he said, go and do it quickly? Yeah, yeah, we're going to run out of food. Okay, say it loud, Jude.
Judas was very self-centered.
Yeah, well, okay, that you might draw that conclusion, yeah.
And they say that a lot about people who commit suicide or whatever. I don't know.
But he's not committing suicide yet.
No,
But that could be a quality or character.
And when you say Satan entered him, Satan just saw an opportunity.
Yeah,
He couldn't try to go into some of the other apostles' hearts.
right.
He knew that
That's true. I think that's a good point, that he was aware that this guy was very vulnerable right now. So anyway, they didn't get it, and they just thought, well, every time I read this section here, it always makes me laugh, at a time when this is really kind of a real serious thing. It's like, you know what's being talked about. I know what's being talked about. But Jesus says, they say, well, hey, he must have been talking about how we're going to need some food, which they always seemed to need food when they had all these groups around them. But now this wasn't a big group. But anyway, again, they're somewhat naive. Buy the things we need for the feast, or else that he was to give something to the poor. Now, why does this draw your attention when the idea that he might be giving something to the poor? Go ahead, Nolan.
Well, going back to when, was it Mary Magdalene or?
Yeah, we'll get to it, but when
When she used the fragrant oil on his
right.
feet, and Judas spoke up and says, well, that money, that could
Yeah.
have been sold and money given to the
Right. And so that would tell you something about him, I suppose. What do you feel about his idea of money? You get any evidence of that? What did they think? So after receiving the bread, he left immediately, and it was night. And so for some, we're assuming that was what it was. But there's also other things that may come into this, and that's what Nolan's talking about. It's not specifically said here. But you're going to have to understand here, he betrayed Jesus for what? Yeah, money. We'll just call it money. It was 30 pieces of silver. So I think it's pretty clear that this guy had a problem with money in terms of thinking he deserves maybe the money that other people have. So anyway, we'll read this, and I'll see if I can get a little more insight out of you guys on this. But yeah.
Real quick, back on the other verse when it says Satan entered him.
Right.
I think it's stark contrast when Jesus told Simon that, hey, Satan has asked for you by name,
Yeah.
that he can sift you by wheat. But I pray for you that you have faith.
Okay, that was Peter then, you mean?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So that was, I think, in stark contrast. I mean, Christ knew Judas's heart.
Yeah, right.
He also knew Simon Peter's heart.
Right.
And where Simon would take it if something were to happen. I mean, Satan asked for him, and he didn't get him.
Yeah.
Judas already gave himself to Satan when he decided to betray Jesus.
Yeah, so he already has a tendency that is certainly devilish, and that is the love of money, I think, comes out in this. And that right there, as far as I'm concerned, could have been a good enough reason for him to betray Jesus. Anybody want to argue with that? Or you got a better thought on that? Because there are other reasons why. Go ahead, Dave.
I don't have a better thought, but my thinking on this is I've always felt sorry for him.
Yeah.
I felt like maybe he had a weakness, like we might all have a weakness in our life, and it was never addressed.
Yeah.
And if you let something like that go, the things that bothered you in the past you become numb to it, and then you add to it, add to it. It finally took him to where he betrays Christ, and the realization of what he's done and where he got in life. It's a good lesson for me. It's a good lesson for all Christians.
Right.
We can't think high of ourselves. We have issues that need to be taken care of.
Right.
You can't just say, well, I'm just a weak person.
Yeah, because I think when he comes to the point of being, doing the betrayal, then and it's money. He in fact he asked about the money. So going back to Clay's point, the devil's been working on him for a long time in regarding his attitude toward money, and so it wasn't so much that he hated Jesus. I don't think he hated Jesus. But he was very, very weak when it came to what money was and how he was to use it and what it was supposed to be used for. So when it was evening, he came with the 12, and as they were reclining at the table and eating, truly I say to you that one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me. So this is kind of a marked description of what's going on there. They began to be grieved and to say to him one by one, surely not I. But he said to them, it is not one of the 12, the one who dips bread with me in the bowl. That's who it is. It's one of the 12. For the Son of Man is going away, just as it is written about him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. Now, anybody want to wax eloquently on that and just draw some conclusions about it? I mean, obviously, what Jesus is saying is this is a bad thing, that this guy's gotten himself into. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Rob.
And maybe there is an answer to this, but I always think of this passage. If it's not Judas, it was got to be somebody.
Yeah.
Because somebody had to betray Jesus. Somehow Jesus had to end up in the hands of the Romans, be put on the cross. That process had to be initiated somehow, some way. So if not Judas, it was going to be some man. It was going to be somebody.
Well, once Jesus is clarifying that one of the 12 is going to do it, but he said not all of you are going to do it.
Right.
Okay.
My point was I just kind of think of, this had not so much in that it's judgment upon Judas, in a callous way, but someone needed to betray Jesus.
Yeah.
It had to be done in order for the plan to be fulfilled. But Judas is the one that ends up falling prey.
Okay, so you're not excusing him for what he did. Okay, sounded a little bit like you were leaning toward that.
Not
Okay.
excusing him. What I'm saying is, it is inevitable that Jesus is going to be betrayed.
Right.
And this passage to me sort of smacks of that, is that whoever betrays Jesus is going to have a bad time.
Yeah, it's like he's gonna wish he never did that. I suppose in a very simplistic way, but the Lord is thinking very seriously. I mean, he doesn't say, "Oh, okay, this is a really bad thing, but don't worry, everybody's going to be saved because he does it." That's not what he's saying. It's hard for us to understand this in terms of how do we grasp with what's actually happening. And Robert brought out a point. It's a good point, but this was something that was much bigger, obviously, than Judas. And Judas was the one who, I think it was his love of money that made him set up for this. And so it wasn't like when the devil got into him, it was like, aha, you love money, go for it. Well, this is part of who he was. No doubt about it. Okay, anybody else? Any comments further? Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I think of him as a pretty bad guy.
Yeah.
He evidently was a good man.
Yeah, go figure, huh? I mean, it's really hard to understand, you know, when we look at this, because we're looking at this all, you know, from the finish to the back, and to the reverse to the front, and but I mean, you could say, well, that was the reason. There needed to be someone there who was a good target to do this. But I mean, you know, you think about it. Some of the disciples weren't exactly shining stars. I mean, they weren't perfect people in any way, and they had doubts. And Peter, you know, he was tempted and was pretty miserable as a result of it. But you do get this impression that there's something about him that doesn't win him over to you completely. And we're going to look at that at some verses that are going to come. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. I was just going to ask, so Peter's denying Christ, is that not as bad as Judas's betrayal?
I think it's a different sin. How's that? You know, yeah, yeah. Go ahead. You want to say something? No, I mean, I think that you know, when you start trying to figure out, you know, what sin's worse, well, then that sometimes gets into a territory where, you know, God can decide that. But it's something that he did, and it certainly didn't turn into something that caused him to be the one who betrayed the Lord. Go ahead, Kerry.
In his mind, it could have been that he saw things, well, he did see things very different.
Yeah.
He could betray Christ, but he had just traveled with him for 3 years. And he knew what remarkable, miraculous events Jesus could both perform and produce. And there was probably the thought in his head, well, I can get 30 pieces of silver and no harm, no foul.
Sure. He was the kind of guy that is called, he's referred to as a zealot also. And can you think how that might have, you know, gotten into this whole thing, you know, about why he would do what he does? And we talked about what was the zealot? What was the zealot all about of that particular party? Okay, so against Roman authority, okay, and against authority generally. Didn't like taxes, didn't like anything. And so, you know, maybe he's thinking, Jesus has been so negative about dying, well, we'll let him die. We'll just go ahead, we'll let him die. And maybe we'll get another person to come in and be the Savior and be the one who is going to, you know, take us to where we want to go. Go ahead, Mona.
He was given the one weakness that he had. That was his greatest weakness, and it conquered him. He didn't conquer it. He did repent later in one of the Gospels. He repented. He knew exactly what he did.
Oh, yeah, sure.
But the love of that money was he couldn't overcome
Ye-
his greatest weakness. Where Peter did, he repented and
Yeah, that's true. We could say, well, he was a better guy than Judas, yeah, or you could say that he controlled himself a little bit better, and all that, you know, may be true, but nevertheless, as was said there, he was very, very susceptible to this. This was his weak spot, and if it maybe could have been something where he could have combined it with his anti-government feelings. I'm not sure exactly how you could, just looking at this straightforwardly. But nevertheless, you know, this guy, certainly, as I've already said, and a couple other people like Mona have already said as well. So he says, after he says, for the Son of Man is going away just as it is written about him. So it's going to happen. That's pretty much what that verse is saying. And so he says, but still, woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born. Maybe Jesus already, you know, knew that he was going to take his own life. And that's what he's talking about. I don't know about that for sure. So anyway, it's pretty clear somebody's going to betray him. And it's not up to you, it's not up to me to excuse him for what he's done or to come up with good reasons for why he did or say, you know, we're all weak. I mean, that is true. But still, the Lord had selected him, I think, more because of he was so drawn to the money that it overwhelmed his whatever feelings he had about Jesus. So we can talk about that a little bit more. So here's the deal. While he was still speaking, Jesus again, behold, Judas, one of the 12, came accompanied by a large crowd with swords and clubs, who came from the chief priests and elders of the people. Now, he who was betraying him gave them a sign previously. They had already planned, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give him a real good kiss, solid, to identify that he's the one. And he says, whomever I kiss is the one, arrest him. Immediately, Judas went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and he kissed him. So how do you feel about that? We're talking about feelings. We're talking about what it'd be like to be in a situation like that. And he knows what he's doing, and he obviously is going to have some problems that he's dealing with it, but he just says, greetings, Rabbi, and he kissed him. Seems kind of rough, doesn't it? Doesn't seem like there's a lot of heart there at that point. He's going to betray, and of course, there's been that money that's been promised to him. So then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. So, it brings us to this, if we need to go why, I mean, we always want to know why people do things. People want to know why I do things. And so, when you look at this, you know, you can't walk away from this saying, why did he do it? I mean, he was with Jesus. He had to see Jesus do wonderful things. But again, what have I been promoting? I've been promoting the idea that this guy had one major promise. It seems like he'd do just about anything for money. And that's very powerful. We've seen it happen to people in our own lives. Any other comments about that? So can you think of any other reasons why he did it? I mean, just from your own perspective. The Lord, we know it was because it was prophesied he was going to do it. So that kind of takes care of the deal. But what else? Go ahead, Terry.
I kind of already said this, but we see this happen in the lives of members and people we love all the time. Somebody who we think very highly of, and we think, oh, they're such a great person.
Yeah.
Does something that we think is just unbelievable. Like, how could they have gotten there? How could they have done that?
Yeah.
But because of sin, it goes back to what Dave was saying. We all have these problems, and this sin can build up in us without us really even noticing, and it takes over, and then we
It kind of becomes a part of you, doesn't it? Yeah.
we get into the spot where Judas was, where he's like, what did I just do?
Yeah.
He didn't see it coming.
Right.
He was just so focused on the money problem
Right.
that he didn't see the snowball building, and before he knew it, it was out of control. And
It had turned into some way for him to make money.
yeah, exactly. And
Okay.
he didn't see the bigger picture until it was.
Yeah, it was too late when he realized actually what he had done. Go ahead, Jessica.
I think one of the other reasons that he might have done it is that he didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God.
A little louder, I can't hear you when you get quiet.
I don't think he truly believed that Jesus was the Son of God. Because if he actually believed it, like some of the other apostles did,
Yeah.
betrayal wouldn't have really come into his mind. But he didn't believe in Jesus. It came down to a lack of faith.
Yeah. You could be right about that, Jessica. But does anybody else have a thought about what you just said? Say it again now. So your reasoning is he didn't really believe.
He didn't have enough faith. And
Okay.
he didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God.
Yeah.
That he was God brought down on earth. He didn't believe it.
He didn't believe it enough to ignore the temptation. Let's put it that way. I mean, I know he intellectually probably knew who Jesus was, but the moment just got so big for him and was just too much of a temptation for him, and the Lord certainly would know that about him. But I think what Terry says is something that we all understand. Okay, just a second, Jeff, and I'll just repeat what she said, and I'll call on you. Okay, how many times do we have situations where we say, "Oh, I would have never thought he would have done this"? And it happens a lot. We hold people in such esteem. We just think they're, above doing the wrong thing. But it happens. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
On a more optimistic side, I'm thinking Jesus called him out and said, "Hey, you're going to betray me." Maybe in part of its justification in the reason Judas did it, but he said, "Hey, well, I've been following Jesus for 3 years. I know this to be a man of truth." Maybe Judas thought, "Well, I'm going to play into the plan. I'm going to play into the prophecy. I can be part of this."
And he might make 30 pieces of silver out of the deal.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
suppose so,
Yeah.
But that could be some, he might have actually, it's hard to say if he was doing a good thing, but he kind of took the Lord's cue, said, "Okay, well, if the Lord's saying I'm going to do
Yeah.
this,
That's
get into action."
a kind of a fatalistic view. He's saying, well, he said somebody's going to do it. It might as well be me. Yeah.
Kind of kiss on him and everything, I'm going to play
Yeah.
something really good.
I mean, as far as what I'm learning about the guys that are there, I mean, I can understand why, from that perspective, why he would be the one who would go ahead and do it. Good comment. Go ahead, Dave, and then James.
Thought rather ahead that he may have seen this as an opportunity to make a quick buck. Up to this
Yeah.
point in time, every time that Pharisees or Sadducees wanted to try to attract Jesus, he would escape.
Yeah.
Maybe he was thinking, well, I'll play into this. I know they're offering money to
Sure.
someone to turn him in or show him where he's at.
Yeah.
And an opportunity for him to make a quick buck, not thinking that the outcome of this betrayal
Yeah.
would be his death.
Yeah. And there was something good that came out of this. Jesus died for our sins, but, how did it affect him in the end in terms of what he thought about himself? Go ahead, one more comment, Dave.
When he learned that Jesus was condemned and crucified on the cross, he had a change of heart and tried to return the money. Maybe he was thinking, that's not what I was thinking was going to happen.
Yeah.
Felt guilty for
Yeah, when you consider all the things that happened around the crucifixion, the temple and the curtain ripping and all these things might have really made him think, well, I've really goofed up here. He truly is the Son of God. I don't see. It's hard for me anyway to really try to understand someone, and I think, like Jessica said, obviously he didn't believe enough. If you ask Peter, do you believe that Jesus is the Son of God? Do you think he would have said yes and then turned around and did what? Betrayed him. We all have our weak moments. Go ahead, James.
I was thinking that, I don't think that Jesus didn't believe. I don't think I agree with that part. I think the difference between belief and obedience is separate. Because, take for example, the children of Israel, God gets them out of Egypt.
Right.
They believe he's there. However, they completely disobey and start worshiping the golden calf.
Sure. Yeah, and if they got too hungry, then they would complain, even though they'd seen these miracles happen.
So they said they definitely believe, they know that God's there, and
Yeah.
they totally just choose to disobey. And then I think it's also just amazing how, in some sense, it just shows that Jesus had chosen him, knowing full well he would betray him, but he still gave him the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's that sense that
Sure.
and casting out demons, so he had that.
And he was out there preaching and teaching as far as we know, just like the rest of them.
Exactly, so it just goes to show the grace that he had all the same opportunities as everybody else.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. Okay. So did he have a money problem? Well, I think here's the one. Nolan brought this up. This set of circumstances that kind of shows that he did. At least it's enough evidence for me. And I think for the people who are around him, they seem to know that as well. John chapter 12, they're in that same gathering. He tells the story about Mary then took a pound. She was actually there at the feast, sorry. But he said, a pound of every expensive perfume of pure nard. Now this Mary is the Mary and Martha Mary, okay? And they anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair, and the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who intended to betray him, that's you know that this is kind of what John's thinking. I mean, he writes inspired by the Holy Spirit, but at the same time, he's still there. And says, why was this perfume sold for 300 denarii and the proceeds given to poor people? So he thought this was a big waste of money. Not really, if he was beginning to believe about Jesus dying and that he's going to be buried and this is going to be a very, very real thing, I think, you got to wonder, what he's thinking here. So they're talking about Judas. He says, why was this perfume not sold? That's his speaking. And the proceeds given to poor people. Now, he said this not because he cared about the poor. So I don't know exactly, whatever kind of relationship John had with Judas. He had him pretty well figured out. I would say that for sure. He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. Now, why do you suppose Jesus would allow a thief, to remain as part of the apostles? You've all been kind of saying it. Because, go ahead, Dave.
Well, in a sense, Matthew was a thief also, at least in that he probably padded, the taxes.
Yeah.
Stuff. So,
He could easily be perceived as that. Yeah.
so they were, all of them had their issues.
Yeah.
He's probably good.
And they didn't hesitate to condemn each other. They looked down on one another and seemed to be in a constant state of competition. Now, John talks about himself as being, the Lord's favorite, in effect. That's what he says. So I think it's probably right. But again, he didn't hesitate to say it. Go ahead, Rich.
It goes back to my point when he pilfered from the treasury. I mean, he's going to get a percentage of this.
Yeah. Right.
If you look at
Well, he was the treasurer. The money came to him. Yeah. Keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay, yeah. Gotcha. Over the left shoulder.
We're really being cheated here because Mark and Lisa's daughter's not here. It's just kind of a psychological thing we're talking about.
I was going to make a comment about that, because we had a conversation about Jesus.
Anyway,
Hey, these people are always saying, "Oh, I thought of that first." And we're just like the apostles around here.
so she can shut it down. Maybe my layman's understanding of this, but a weakness unaddressed can develop into an addiction.
Yeah.
With an addiction, it tears your personality down. So when he's talking about the devil entered him, well, he actually let the devil enter him because he, in my opinion,
Uh-huh.
he's so broken down at this point, he's lost kind of a lot of his self-image.
Yeah.
That's why I'm just not writing him off that he didn't love Christ. He's dealing with some real trash here in his life.
Yeah, and it's hard for us to understand this kind of situation, but again, still he's responsible for what he does.
He has to address it, take
Yeah.
responsibility for it to figure
Yeah.
it out, which he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, well, like somebody who's addicted to gambling or something like that. You know, they just can't help themselves, or they're too stupid to get out of it. But whatever it is, it controls them. Yeah, good. Go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, to go along with what Dave was saying, we've had conversations about, the apostles at home, and I know that when Madison was at home, she and Lisa both came to the conclusion that he is more of an extroversion type of a personality. That's what they think, and I think that
These are the psychologists giving their opinion, yeah.
where the risk
Yeah.
is worth more than, where the risk is worth the reward,
Yeah.
and it just goes along with it.
Yeah, he would have been an interesting study. There's no doubt about it. We get a chance to look at him and to try to understand it. Go ahead, Carrie. Was your hand up?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
He's probably thinking the economics that were unique to him. If they had sold the perfume for a large sum of money, that would make it easier for them to continue his pilfering and a little bit more security that people would find out.
Yeah, and I think they figured that's what he was going to do with it if he gets it. So, yeah, go ahead.
I find a lot of hope in that Jesus drew these kind of people close to himself.
Yeah,
That it wasn't just, like the Pharisees and Sadducees who thought they would be the people, that just the holiest of holies
Yeah.
were drawn to him. That those are the people, not a motel for saints, but a hospital for sinners.
Sure.
Church, that we're all
Right.
welcome to be drawn to Christ. And that, in seeing everything that happened with Judas and how Jesus still treated him, and even knowing he was going to be betrayed, washed his feet, called him friend, almost helped him along
Sure.
in the evil doing that he was planning. Still, the love that he had for this person gives me, a lot of hope.
yeah, and I think that's a great lesson for us all to understand about the people Jesus picked. And it showed his love for individuals even who weren't super talented or graduated from minister school with a 4.5 grade point or something like that. He takes someone like Judas. Now, he obviously could count money. That is a fact. But going back to Dave's point, and what we're all understanding here is not like he was just saying, okay, let me figure this out. He's going to die anyway. I might as well make some money on this deal. And I don't think he actually looked at it, that way. And I'm giving a don't think you. But anybody else on this? Yeah, go ahead, Rand.
I kind of got a different thought about this. Judas had
This is the prison version? Is that what you...
Judas had the money box, so he had the money. I don't think the motivation was money. I think really what the deal is at this time, the apostles believed that Jesus is going to establish a kingdom on earth.
It's got to be in the back of their minds. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
If you think about that, there's going to be a great deal more money that he's going to be handling soon. But the deal is that by betraying Christ, not necessarily out of evil intentions, but in the idea of he wants to hurry up the process of getting him to establish this kingdom on earth, that he's going to have, there's going to have to be a time when there's going to be a conflict between the Romans and Jesus,
Sure.
the disciples. And in order to do that, somebody's going to have to say, you got to do something. This is Jesus, because it's not like he was hiding. He was out in the open.
He seemed to not be bashful about taking money and doing what he wanted with it.
Yeah, and it's not like the Pharisees and Sadducees didn't know who he was. It's not like they really needed Judas Iscariot to walk up to Jesus and kiss him on the cheek or anything.
Yeah.
They knew who he was. They just wanted somebody so that they could say to the people, he told us, we didn't do it. This is not us. This is
Right.
and create and Judas, instead of doing it out of betrayal or hatred, was actually
sort of well, as a zealot, he might look at it that way. You know, I'm just going to prepare for this kingdom, and we'll have a good start to the treasury. Yeah. No, that's good. Hey, this is America. Make your point. Go ahead, Nolan.
This is the high school version.
Okay.
So just an example, guy who was one of my coaches in high school, and, he was well liked, well known, and he was a high school coach and also my history teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And years later, this is back in the 90s when I was at Bosco Prison.
Right.
Apparently, he got caught up in a scheme where he was taking the booster, money from the booster, and having a guy do the stocks for him, and as he won, he was replacing the money back in the booster. But what he didn't realize is this guy was a con, and all of a sudden, now the guy was taking his money, so he wasn't able to replace the money to the boosters.
Yeah.
Eventually, he was found guilty of 10 of 11 counts of embezzlement.
And those are pretty good counts. I mean,
And that speaks to Dave Rice's point about the addiction.
well, I think that's right. I mean, and we all have this sort of intuitive feeling that if I just had a little bit more, then I would be okay. So maybe we are able to control it, but nevertheless, it's there for most of us. Okay. It wasn't because his name was evil, and I told you before, the name actually had a degree of honor. It was the tribe of kings, name of one of the 12 original sons of Isaac, so it was a commonly used name. It was also used by parents of two Jewish leaders back in the time just before Jesus came along, Maccabee. He was a national hero, and his first name was Judas. Judas of Galilee, also a national hero. There's another thing, since we got just a couple of minutes, but I'll throw this in. He was a Judean. Most of the guys were Galileans, and they spoke different dialects. And so he could have also felt a little bit like an outsider here because he wasn't a buddy of the Galilean guys, Peter, James, and John, those people. And he was from another region. And so that might have caused him to hold some of these people in contempt. But you can just think about that and go home and lay down on your pillow and go, yeah, that might be interesting. But I think Randy was really stupid when he made that point. Okay, so why are you not likely to hear of that being a given name today? And we've already talked about that. So most of us have done a lot of thinking about Judas. And, you know, it's one of those things. I mean, we know how it ended up. We don't have the time to do that, but, you know, go ahead and look at Acts chapter 1 where it talks about where he did, and it's also in Matthew where he committed. I mean, why did he commit suicide? I mean, the way it's carried on, the way it's committed to us. Because he felt total grief, didn't he, for what he had done to the Lord. And of course, it'd be really easy to say, well, why didn't you think of that first, you know? But that's the point. When something has such a hold upon you, then it will get something out of you that you may not want. And all of us have to struggle with this. And so I'm thinking, you know, I'm trying to look at Judas with the idea that, you know, I'm really sorry that it happened to him. But it was necessary. But it makes me want to think more about my own life and how I shouldn't take things for granted, or how I shouldn't do something that I think maybe people might not notice what he's done. Kind of like the high school teacher, you know. It sounded like a pretty good deal, you know. He could really sort of convey with a big smile, I'm really helping, you know. the program, but he wasn't smart enough to realize that the go-between wasn't. Anybody else? Okay, so next week we will talk about, we've talked about James and John. We're going to put the emphasis on John because he's a pretty significant guy that would allow our desire to look at him a little bit more closely because he wrote more than, most of the apostles did. And of course, he wrote an incredible description of Jesus and his time on the face of the earth. And then, of course, he wrote in 1 John, and he wrote the book of Revelation. And so we want to look more at things related to his character because he was blessed to be able to, with the help of the Holy Spirit, do certain things. But we're trying to look at these guys to make them people. And so keep that in mind when you're looking at John next week. Okay, that's it. We're dismissed.